Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling something that I think gets to the very heart of why people own physical assets in the first place.
It's the fundamental conflict, isn't it?
It is. The mission for us today, using the sources you sent over, is to really break down this huge question. How do you actually use the value that's locked up in your wealth?
Mm.
Without selling it, without destroying the very asset you work so hard to acquire.
Exactly. And for anyone who owns physical silver, the default mindset for, decades now has been purely defensive. You stack it, you hide it, it sits in a safe. It's this static insurance policy.
Right, a hedge.
A hedge against total collapse.
Yeah.
But what we're going to explore today is how you can shift that thinking, how to turn silver from, a purely defensive shield into an offensive financial tool. And we're going to do that by looking at how the ultra-wealthy use it as collateral for loans to get tax-free cash.
And I have to just jump in right now and be totally honest. As someone who comes from that classic stacking world, the whole idea of this deep dive gives me some serious anxiety.
I can imagine.
We are talking about giving up physical control. So our listener's mission here is to really understand this buy, borrow, die strategy and decide if the tax benefits are really, truly worth the risks. Because, and we have to say this up front, the idea of handing your physical stack, something you spent years building because you don't trust the system, handing it over to a bank, it feels like it violates the #1 rule.
If you don't hold it, you don't own it.
Exactly. That's the bedrock. It feels wrong on a gut level.
And that anxiety is completely valid. It's the right place to start. That principle is the foundation of this entire movement, and we can't just dismiss it. But what I hope we can show today is that you're not eliminating risk. You're just exchanging one kind of risk for another.
What do you mean?
You're swapping the slow, quiet, but absolutely guaranteed risk of stagnation in taxes for a more active, calculated financial risk. And we need to understand why the wealthiest people who could afford the best safes in the world, they always choose the calculated financial risk. It's a strategic trade-off. And it all starts with understanding what the real threat is today.
Okay. So to even think about giving up that control, we have to start with why anyone would. And that means looking at history. The fear is real. It's the ghost of 1933.
Right. That event. It wasn't just a historical footnote. It literally created the default strategy for holding physical metal for the better part of a century.
It did. We're talking about Executive Order 6102, Franklin D. Roosevelt. For anyone who doesn't know the story, this is the moment that's burned into the mind of every traditional stacker. It was when the U.S. government actually physically came for people's gold.
They labeled it hoarding, and they forced pretty much everyone, citizens, banks, to turn in their gold coins, their gold certificates.
All for fiat cash. You got paper dollars in return. There were a few tiny exceptions, for rare coins or jewelry. But for the most part, it was a forced surrender.
It was a massive physical seizure. Let's call it what it was. And the official reason was to stabilize the banking system. But really, it was about giving the government control. It let them print money without being tied to a rigid gold standard. It was a direct transfer of wealth from private hands to the state.
And because of that one event, that very specific, very real precedent, the strategy for the last 90 years has been simple. You acquire it, you hide it, you bury it in the backyard, and you wait for the storm.
And the logic is sound. The benefit seems absolute. Safety, total protection from physical seizure. If they don't know you have it, they can't take it.
It's the ultimate shield. It's about being sovereign over your own wealth, period.
And that strategy is 100% effective against the threat of 1933 repeating itself. But, and this is the big pivot we need to make, that strategy protects the back door while the front door has been left wide open.
The front door being what?
Modern financial confiscation. It's not a guy with a government badge knocking on your door. It's quieter, systematic. And it's happening right now, right under our noses.
Okay, I think this is a really critical point that a lot of people who are focused only on the physical threat they miss it. So define it for us. What are the mechanisms of this modern financial confiscation?
It really works through three main channels that all feed into each other. You've got inflation, you've got capital gains taxes, and then you have the really insidious one, opportunity cost.
Let's start with inflation. That's the one everyone feels.
Right. It's the stealth tax. It's the constant slow decay of the purchasing power of your money, the dollars in your bank account, the cash in your wallet. It's losing value every single day. The system is designed to punish savers.
And to reward borrowers, which I'm sure we'll get back to.
We absolutely will. Then you've got capital gains taxes. We'll go deep on this in a minute. But the simple version is the government just waits. They wait until you sell and realize a profit, and then they swoop in and take a huge chunk.
And the third one, opportunity cost.
This is the one that's hardest to see, but it can be the most damaging over time. It's what I call dead capital.
Dead capital. That phrase really sums up the strategist mindset, doesn't it? The idea of just letting an asset sit there doing nothing.
It does.
Yeah.
Look, if you have $100,000 of silver sitting in a safe for 20 years, it does its job. It gives you incredible peace of mind. It's a fantastic hedge against a true systemic meltdown. But that capital is completely stagnant. It is dead.
Meaning it's not working for you?
It's not generating rent. It's not paying you dividends. It's not growing in a diversified portfolio that could be earning you, say, 7 or 8% a year, compounded. Over 20 years, the opportunity you lost by having that capital do nothing. It could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. You bought safety, but the cost was growth.
Okay, I have to push back here. Because isn't that the whole point? Isn't that stagnation the price you pay for real safety? If the whole system goes down tomorrow, that silver in my safe is worth everything. Your rental properties, your dividend stocks, they're just worthless pieces of paper. You trade that growth for absolute sovereignty when it matters most.
And that is a perfectly rational defensive position. It's focused entirely on that tail risk, that black swan event. But the strategist plays the probabilities.
How so?
The strategist knows that a total collapse might happen, but they operate on the certainty that inflation and taxes will happen every single year. So the smart money doesn't just bury assets, they leverage them. They make them fight the system while also hedging against its failure.
So it's about playing offense and defense at the same time.
Exactly, because if that collapse doesn't happen tomorrow, if it's 10 or 20 years away, the cost of having held dead capital while everyone else was compounding their wealth can be, well, catastrophic. It can be a bigger loss than any physical risk you were trying to avoid.
So that's the conflict. The ghost of 1933 tells us to lock it away. But the reality of today's inflation and tax code pushes us to put it to work, which means taking on a different kind of risk.
That's the realization, and that's why we're doing this deep dive. Because selling your silver, as we're about to show, is often a huge financial mistake because of how it's taxed. Borrowing against it, well, that's the potential escape hatch from the tax trap. It turns that defensive shield into an offensive weapon.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics then, the tax trap as you called it. This is crucial because I think a lot of people just assume it's normal capital gains.
And that assumption can cost you dearly. It seems like a small detail until you're talking about real money, and then it's absolutely devastating. The IRS has a special classification for physical precious metals, gold, silver, all of them. They lump them in with things like art, rare stamps, antique furniture.
What's the category?
They call them collectibles. And that one word is the entire trap, because when you sell a collectible, it doesn't trigger the normal long-term capital gains rate. It triggers the collectible's tax rate, which is capped at a much higher 28%.
28%. Wait, hold on. Most assets, stocks, real estate, depending on your income, the long-term rate is what, 15%? Maybe 20% for high earners.
That's right, 15 or 20.
So why the penalty? Why is there an extra 8 or 13% just for holding physical metal?
It's by design. The government wants to incentivize you to invest in things that generate economic activity, businesses, stocks, real estate that can be rented out, things that generate taxable events along the way.
So they punish you for holding a non-productive asset.
Precisely. The 28% rate is a clear disincentive. It's a way of saying, if you're going to just hoard this valuable thing that doesn't help the economy, we're going to take a much bigger piece when you finally sell it. And that's where the trap snaps shut.
Okay, let's walk through a real-world example with numbers so people can feel the pain.
Let's do it. So let's say years ago you bought a substantial amount of silver. Your cost basis, what you paid for it, was $50,000. And you were smart, you held on, and today that stack is worth $150,000. So you have a gain of $100,000 on paper.
Okay, simple enough.
Now, life happens. You need cash.
Yeah.
Let's say you need $50,000 for a down payment on a house. So you decide to sell off a portion of your stack to get that $50,000.
So you sell enough to realize a $50,000 gain, and right away the tax man comes calling.
And he's not happy. He wants his 28%. So $50,000 times 0.28. That's a $14,000 federal tax bill.
Yeah.
Due immediately.
14 grand just vanishes.
Gone.
Yes.
Which means to actually get the $50,000 you needed in your pocket, you had to sell almost $70,000 worth of silver. You had to sell way more than you planned just to cover the tax bill.
Yeah.
You're voluntarily just lopping off a huge chunk of your wealth. You lose the silver, and you pay a massive fine for the privilege of having been a successful investor.
It's incredible. The system lets you build the wealth, but the moment you try to touch it to turn it into usable cash, they hit you with the worst possible rate.
And this is exactly why the ultra-wealthy almost never sell their appreciating assets. It's the cardinal rule. You never, ever trigger the capital gains event. And that brings us to the strategy: buy, borrow, die.
Okay, so instead of selling, what's the move?
Instead of selling the silver, you pledge it. You take it to a specialized lender, and you get what's called an asset-backed loan. The loan is secured entirely by the value of your physical metal.
And the bank takes custody of it, which is the part that makes my stomach turn, but we'll get to that.
We will. But first, the magic moment. The reason this whole strategy is worth even considering, despite the risk.
And what's that?
It's the most basic rule of the tax code. Debt is not taxable income.
Right. That's the whole game right there.
That's the whole game. When you sell and get $50,000 in cash, that's a taxable event. The government gets its $14,000. But when you receive $50,000 as a loan, the IRS gets zero. It's not revenue, it's an obligation. It is 100% tax-free, immediate liquidity.
So you get the cash you need, just like if you sold, but you don't have to give a third of your gains away to the government.
And even better, you still own the metal. You keep the entire stack. So if the price of silver doubles tomorrow, you get all of that upside. You've unlocked the liquidity without sacrificing the principal. The tax bill is just deferred.
Yeah.
Indefinitely.
But hey, hang on, I have to play devil's advocate here. A loan isn't free. You have to pay interest. So if I take out a loan, even a good one, I might be paying, what, 6, 7, 8% a year? Over a few years, that adds up. Couldn't that interest cost actually be worse than just taking the 28% tax hit and being done with it?
That is an excellent question. It's the most important calculation you have to make. You have to compare the costs. The 20% tax is a permanent, immediate loss of capital, gone forever. The interest on the loan is the ongoing cost of deferring that tax and keeping your asset.
So it's a trade-off.
It is. But think about it this way. You pay, say, 7% a year in interest, but you keep 100% of your silver. If silver appreciates by just 8% that year, you've already covered your interest cost, and you're still ahead. You're betting that your asset will appreciate faster than the cost of your debt.
A bet on continued appreciation, but more than that, a bet on keeping your principal intact.
Exactly. The cost of borrowing is manageable. The cost of selling is permanent and severe. Plus, and this is another key point, if you use that borrowed money for an investment, which we'll talk about, the interest you pay on the loan can often be tax deductible, which lowers the real cost even further.
And then, of course, there's the last part of the phrase, the die part. That's the ultimate tax dodge.
It's the elegant conclusion to the strategy. When you hold an appreciated asset until you pass away, your heirs typically get what's called a step-up in basis.
Meaning the IRS basically resets the clock.
They reset the clock. Let's go back to our example. Your cost basis was $50,000. The silver was worth $150,000 when you passed away. If you had sold it, you would have owed tax on that $100,000 gain. But because your kids inherited it, their new cost basis becomes $150,000, the market value, on the date of death.
So if they turn around and sell it the next day for $150,000?
Their gain is zero. The tax is zero. That $100,000 capital gain, that 28% tax liability, it's just wiped off the books. Forever. That's how this strategy achieves true tax avoidance, not just deferral.
It really changes the entire equation. So we're moving from just storage, a defensive shield, to leverage, an offensive weapon you can use against the tax code itself.
And you're using inflation to your advantage for the first time. You borrow dollars today. You repay that debt over the next 5 or 10 years with dollars that are worth less than the ones you borrowed. So your asset, silver, is hedging against inflation, while the debt you owe is actively being eroded by inflation. It's a beautiful mechanism.
Okay, assuming our listener is on board with the why, now we have to get to the how and the who. Because this is where it gets really dangerous. Not all loans are the same. Not by a long shot.
This is the most critical operational part. If you get this wrong, the whole strategy blows up in your face. We have to draw a very, very bright line between desperation and strategy.
And that line runs right between a pawn shop and a legitimate bullion bank.
Absolutely. Let's start with the trap, the pawn shop model. This is for the person who needs cash fast and doesn't know any better. This is how you lose your stack.
They operate on a completely different model.
It's pure predation. First, their loan-to-value, or LTV, is terrible. They might offer you 40, maybe 50% of the melt value of your silver. But the real poison is the interest rate.
What are we talking about here? Not a normal annual rate.
No. We're talking about rates that can be as high as 20 or 25% per month.
Per month, that's what, nearly 300% a year?
Exactly. They are not in the business of lending you money you can pay back. Their business model is based on you defaulting. They want you to fail so they can seize your asset for pennies on the dollar.
It's not leverage, it's a fast track to liquidation. It's a trap.
It's a trap. So let's move on to the strategy. The bullion lender model. This is where the smart money operates. We're talking about specialized, regulated financial institutions. They understand the asset. They know physical silver is a globally traded, liquid commodity.
And their terms reflect that.
Completely. First, the LTV is much more reasonable. You're typically looking at somewhere between 60 and 75% of the current spot value. And the interest rates are in line with other commercial secured loans, maybe a few points over the prime rate, so 5 to 8% APR, annual.
A manageable cost of capital, not a punishment.
Correct. But now we have to address the elephant in the room, the prepper's biggest fear. The reason this whole conversation is so difficult: custody.
Right. With the bullion lender model, you don't get to keep your silver in your safe.
This is it. This is the trade-off. This is the price of admission for the tax benefits. The arrangement requires that your metal is transferred to a secure, insured, third-party vault. We're talking about global names like Brinks or Loomis.
So my silver is sitting in a vault somewhere, completely out of my hands. And you said something earlier that's critical here. I don't hold it, but the lender doesn't own it.
That is the legal distinction. You have pledged it as collateral. You still retain ownership. The title is still in your name. It's just being held in trust as security for the loan. The paperwork has to be crystal clear on that point.
But the moment it leaves my possession, I introduce a new risk. Counterparty risk. I am trusting an institution. I'm trusting a contract. I'm trusting that they'll keep it safe, that they won't go bankrupt, that the government won't just seize the contents of all the vaults one day. I am trading physical control for a legal promise.
You are. That is the calculation. You're swapping the local risk fire, theft from your home, for systemic risk, an institutional failure. For the strategist, if the institution is well-regulated, insured, and audited, that systemic risk is acceptable when weighed against the massive guaranteed cost of taxes and inflation. It's a calculated risk.
But even if you pick the right lender and you trust them completely, there's one financial risk that is always there. The most dangerous part of this whole strategy.
The margin call.
The margin call.
Absolutely. This is the heart of the risk of leverage, especially with a volatile asset like silver. The value of your collateral is not static. It moves every single day. And the bank requires you to maintain that loan-to-value ratio at all times.
So let's run a scenario. Let's make this feel as real and as terrifying as it is.
Okay. Let's use our $100,000 stack of silver again.
Yeah.
And let's say you got greedy. You took the maximum loan the bank would give you, a 75% LTV. So you borrowed $75,000.
They're leveraged to the hilt.
To the hilt. The loan agreement will have a trigger point, a liquidation threshold. Let's say it's 85% LTV. The moment your $75,000 loan represents 85% of your stack's new lower value, the alarm bells go off.
So what kind of price drop gets you there?
Let's do the math. If $75,000 is 85% of the value, that means the total value of your stack has to fall to about $88,000. That's a 12% drop in the price of silver.
Which is not uncommon. Silver can drop 12% in a bad week.
Easily. So the price crashes, the bank's computer immediately flags your account, the phone rings. That is the margin call.
And they don't ask nicely. They demand action now.
Immediately. The contract says you have a very short window, maybe 24 or 48 hours, to fix the problem. You have to post more collateral. That means wiring them more cash, or even more painfully, sending them more of your silver to bring that LTV back down into a safe range.
And if you don't have extra cash just sitting around, if all your wealth is in that silver, you're trapped.
You're trapped. If you cannot meet that margin call, the lender has the legal right, which you gave them, to start liquidating your collateral.
Yeah.
They will sell your silver to pay down your loan. And here's the worst part. They do it at the worst possible time.
At the bottom of the market.
Right.
Because that's when margin calls happen.
Exactly. You are forced to sell your asset at the lowest possible price. You've lost your stack, you've triggered the 28% capital gains tax you were trying to avoid, and you've done it all in a panic, wiping out years of hard work. The power tool just cut off your hand.
Okay. So given that risk, that absolute nightmare scenario, this is not a strategy you can just stumble into. There have to be rules.
There are non-negotiable rules. Mitigating the risk of a margin call is everything. This is what separates the professionals from the amateurs who get wiped out.
The source has laid out 3 golden rules. Let's walk through them.
Rule number 1, and this is the most important, the LTV safety buffer. This is your primary defense. It's simple math. You never, ever borrow the maximum amount offered.
You intentionally build a firewall. You leave a huge cushion so that only a true market crash could ever put you in danger.
Precisely. The bank offers you 75%. You thank them, and you take 40%. Let's run the numbers again on our $100,000 stack. If you only borrow $40,000, your LTV starts at a very safe 40%.
And the bank's liquidation line is still way up at 85%.
Right. So for your $40,000 loan to represent 85% of the collateral's value, the total value of your silver would have to crash all the way down to about $47,000.
Wait, so the price of silver would have to drop by more than half? A 53% crash.
A 53% crash before you even get the margin call.
Oh, yeah.
That is the difference between sleeping soundly at night and staring at the price ticker in a cold sweat. A normal 20 or 30% correction, which happens in commodities, wouldn't even get close to your danger zone. You've created an almost impenetrable buffer.
Okay, that's a huge one. Rule number 2. This goes back to the custody risk. Scrutinizing the fine print. Specifically, one scary-sounding word.
Rehypothecation. This is the ultimate red flag in a loan agreement for a physical asset owner.
So what is it? What does it mean?
Rehypothecation is a legal clause that gives the lender, the bank, the right to take your collateral, your silver, and use it for their own purposes. They can lend it out to someone else. They can use it to secure their own trading.
So my silver isn't just sitting in a vault with my name on it anymore. It's out there being used in the paper markets, maybe on the COMEX, creating all these new layers of risk that I have no control over.
Exactly. And if that bank goes under, you are no longer a secured creditor with a claim on a specific segregated pile of metal. You're just another unsecured creditor in a long line fighting for pennies on the dollar in bankruptcy court. Your physical asset has been turned into a paper claim.
So the actionable advice here is what?
It's absolute. If the loan agreement contains a rehypothecation clause, you walk away, you run. The contract must state explicitly that your collateral is segregated, allocated, and cannot be relent or used for any other purpose. That is non-negotiable.
Okay. Rule 1 protects you from the market. Rule 2 protects you from the bank. What's rule number 3?
Rule number 3 is about protecting you from yourself. It's the essential exit strategy. This entire plan fails if you take this tax-free cash and use it for consumption.
Meaning you can't borrow against your nest egg to go on vacation or buy a new car.
That's financial suicide. You're just digging a deeper hole. No, the strategic use of this loan, the only acceptable use, is to buy more cash-flowing assets. You have to put that money to work.
So you create what the sources called a debt service loop. Can you give us an example?
Sure. Let's go back to our disciplined borrower. Took a $40,000 loan against their $100,000 of silver. The interest at 7% costs about $2,800 a year, or $233 a month. That borrowed money has to generate more than $233 a month.
How?
Scenario A, real estate. You use that $40,000 as a down payment on a small rental property. That property starts generating rent checks every month. After you pay the mortgage, taxes, and insurance, if that property is cash flowing, say, $500 a month, you've more than covered the interest on your silver loan.
And you're building equity in a second asset. The silver is the silent partner funding the deal.
Exactly. Or scenario B, dividend stocks. You take the $40,000 and build a diversified portfolio of stable, blue-chip stocks that pay a reliable dividend. If that portfolio yields 4% a year, that's $1,600 in dividends. That covers a huge chunk of your interest cost, and you can reinvest the rest to compound your growth.
This is the real transformation, then. It turns your silver from that passive end-of-the-world hedge into the foundational capital for a growing, diversified portfolio. You force it to work.
That's the strategic shift. The silver isn't the final destination, it's the fuel. It's the tool you use to acquire other assets that generate cash flow, all while you sidestep that 28% tax bullet.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, from the fear of 1933 to the complex reality of the 2024 tax code. Let's try to bring it all together.
The macro forces are pretty clear. You have a system where the government uses inflation to punish savers. That's fact number 1. And fact number 2 is that the tax code brutally punishes you if you try to sell a physical asset like silver.
So you're trapped between the slow death of inflation and the quick death of taxation.
And for the smart money, the only path left is the one we've described. You hold the real asset, the silver, to protect your purchasing power from inflation. You borrow the fake asset, the fiat currency, against it to get tax-free cash. And then you let that same inflation work for you by eroding the real value of your debt over time.
It's the difference between being a hoarder who just sits and waits and being your own banker who uses their balance sheet to create opportunity.
But we have to end on a very, very strong note of caution.
I agree 100%. The prepper in me needs to scream this from the rooftops. This is not simple. This is not for everyone. This is a high-stakes game that is incredibly unforgiving if you make a mistake.
If you don't follow Rule 1 and you over-leverage, if you don't follow Rule 2 and sign a bad contract, you're not just risking a loss, you are guaranteeing that you will lose your entire stack.
This is an advanced strategy. It requires a deep understanding of leverage, of taxes, of contracts. It requires having extra cash on hand to meet a potential margin call. This is absolutely not for beginners.
It's not. You have to be able to stomach the volatility and have the resources to weather a storm, or the whole elegant plan just crumbles into a disaster.
The future definitely belongs to the owners of real, tangible things. I believe that. But it's only if they know how to use what they own. Burying it buys you peace of mind, but it guarantees financial stagnation, leveraging it. That requires a cold, calculated courage.
It does. It requires you to stop looking at the silver as just a pile of metal in a safe and start looking at it as the foundational asset on a strategic blueprint. It's the fuel for a much larger machine.
So as you think about everything we've discussed today, here's the final thought to leave you with. Maybe the greatest threat to your wealth today isn't that ghost from 1933. It's not the physical seizure. Maybe the real threat is the quiet, slow, passive erosion of value that comes from doing nothing in a world of constant inflation and punitive taxes.
So the question becomes, how do you turn your defensive assets into active participants in your own wealth creation? Even if it means embracing a new, calculated kind of risk. It's about finding that balance between being a preserver and being a builder.